When my marriage began to fall apart, I thought the one place I could turn for comfort was my parents. But when the divorce papers came, and I called them in tears, there was only silence on the other end. No advice, no support, not even a visit to see how I was holding up. They treated my pain like an inconvenience, as if the collapse of my life was just a passing storm I should endure quietly. That I can still remember sitting at the kitchen table the night after my wife left, the divorce papers spread out in front of me, my hands trembling. I had dialed my mother's number 3 times before she finally answered, only to say, "You'll be fine. People get divorced every day." And then she hung up. My name is David, and I am 34 years old. Right now, I'm living through the worst heartbreak of my life, abandoned not only by the woman I married but also by the parents I thought would always be there for me. I didn't just lose a wife, I lost a family I never imagined turning its back on me. That first week was a blur of court documents, empty nights, and unanswered calls. My parents never came to see me, never offered to watch the kids when I was drowning in legal meetings, never even asked how I was surviving. Their silence was louder than any words, and it cut deeper than the divorce itself, and that's when I realized, if I was going to survive this, I'd have to learn to do it without them. The first real crack between me and my parents didn't come from their silence, it came from the moment I realized they had chosen her side. My ex-wife, Anna, was always polite around them, always playing the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. But behind closed doors, she and I had been falling apart for years. I thought my parents knew me well enough to see through the act. I was wrong. One afternoon, my father called me out of the blue. I expected maybe a word of encouragement, or at least some acknowledgement of how hard things had been. Instead, his voice was clipped, formal, almost like I was a stranger. "David," he said, "Anna told us you've been neglecting the kids, working too much, leaving her to carry the burden. If that's true, you need to take responsibility." I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. "Dad, that's not true. You know how hard I've worked to provide for this family. I never abandoned my kids." But he didn't believe me. His reply was ice cold. "We only know what we've been told. And frankly, Anna seems more composed about all of this than you do." That sentence burned into me. My own parents, people who had watched me struggle, had sat at my dinner table, had seen me rush from work to tuck my children in at night, they chose to believe her words over my reality. When I confronted my mother later, she just sighed and said, "Anna is doing her best. Maybe if you had been more patient, things would be different." No compassion, no comfort, just blame. It was then I realized their silence wasn't just indifference. They weren't on the sidelines. They were standing behind her. I hung up that night with a pit in my stomach, understanding something I had never wanted to admit. In my parents' eyes, I wasn't their son anymore. I was the problem. The day of the custody hearing is burned into my memory. I walked into that sterile courtroom with a folder of documents clutched in my hands, praying the judge would see me as the devoted father I had always been. I was nervous but ready, until I looked up and saw my parents sitting on Anna's side of the room. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe they were just there to observe. But when Anna's lawyer stood and announced he would be calling 2 witnesses to testify on her behalf, my parents' names, I felt the floor vanish beneath me. Then my mother walked to the stand, her posture stiff, her face carefully composed. She swore under oath and then, without hesitation, began painting me as an absent, emotionally distant husband. She said Anna had carried the weight of the family, that I buried myself in work, that I had let the marriage rot. I wanted to shout, to tell the judge that none of it was true, that I had sacrificed so much to keep our home together. But all I could do was sit there, my heart pounding, as my father took the stand next. His words cut even deeper. "Anna is the stable one. David is impulsive. He doesn't think about the long term. The children would be better off primarily in her care." Each sentence was a knife, and with every word, I watched years of love, trust, and loyalty unravel. My parents weren't just ignoring my pain, they were fueling it, strengthening Anna's case against me. When the judge adjourned for the day, I walked out numb. Anna had her arm around my mother, whispering something that made them both smile. My father patted Anna on the shoulder like she was his own daughter. That I stood there in the hallway, watching the three of them together, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely orphaned, like the people who gave me life had finally erased me from theirs. The night after the hearing, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove straight to my parents' house, my chest burning with anger and betrayal. When my father opened the door, he looked surprised, as if he hadn't expected me to show up. My mother appeared behind him, her arms crossed tightly, her face already hardening into that cold mask I had grown used to. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "You sat there and lied under oath. You made me look like a monster in front of the judge. Do you have any idea what that does to my chances of keeping my kids?" My father stepped aside, his voice flat. "We told the truth as we saw it." I laughed bitterly. "The truth? You've been in my house, you've seen me raise those kids, help with homework, rush from work just to make it to bedtime. And you still stood there and said I wasn't fit?" My mother cut in sharply. "David, you need to stop blaming everyone else. Anna has been calm and respectful through all of this. You're the one storming in here, shouting. This is exactly what we meant, you don't think before you act." Her words sliced through me. "Respectful? She stole my family, and you applauded her for it. You're supposed to be my parents, but you've done nothing but tear me down when I needed you most." For a moment, there was silence. My father's eyes softened for just a second, like he wanted to say something different. But then he shook his head. "We stand by what we said. Anna is the better choice for the children." That was it. The last thread holding me to them snapped. I felt my chest tighten, my throat dry, but I forced the words out. "Then you've lost me. If you can sit there and betray your own son, you're no parents of mine." I turned and walked out before they could answer, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, tears burning my eyes. In that moment, I realized something I never thought I'd admit: I no longer had parents. Not in the way that mattered. In the days after confronting my parents, I felt more alone than ever. Every phone call went unanswered, every family member seemed to avoid me. Word had spread quickly, my parents' version of the story had become gospel. To most of the family, I was the bitter son who ruined his own marriage and now lashed out at anyone who dared to tell the truth. One evening, as I sat in my car outside the courthouse, gathering the strength for another round of hearings, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Mark. We hadn't spoken in years, not since we were teenagers. The message was short but powerful: "David, I believe you. Can we talk?" We met later that night at a small diner on the edge of town. Mark slid into the booth across from me, his face serious. "I've heard what everyone's saying, but it doesn't add up. I know you, Dave. You've always put your kids first. And the way your parents are treating you? It's wrong." Hearing those words nearly broke me. For weeks, I had been screaming into the void, desperate for someone, anyone, to acknowledge that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't the villain. Mark leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Your mom's been calling everyone, making it sound like Anna's a saint and you're falling apart. But I saw something the other night. Anna was out at a bar with a guy I didn't recognize. They were close. Real close. I thought you should know." My heart lurched. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Positive. I didn't want to get involved, but after hearing how they've all turned on you, I couldn't stay quiet." That night, as I drove home, Mark's words echoed in my head. My parents had chosen Anna's side without question. But if what Mark saw was true, then everything they believed about her being the stable one was a lie. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as I thought. Maybe the truth was waiting for its moment to surface, and I had just found my first ally to help bring it out. Mark's words stayed with me, gnawing at me every waking hour. If Anna was already seeing someone else while portraying herself in court as the picture of a responsible, devoted mother, then I needed proof. Proof that would show the judge, and maybe even my parents, that I wasn't the villain in this story. A week later, Mark texted me again. "She's here. Same bar as last time. Come now." My heart raced as I drove across town. I parked outside the dimly lit place, my palms sweating, and there she was, Anna, sitting at a corner table with the same man Mark had seen before. They weren't just talking. Their hands lingered too long, their smiles too intimate, that I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling, and snapped a few photos. Each click of the camera felt like a step closer to reclaiming my truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer, Sarah Patel. I slid the photos across her desk. She studied them carefully, then leaned back in her chair with a slow nod. "This changes things. If she's presenting herself as the stable parent while engaging in this behavior, the court needs to know. And if we can show she's been neglecting the kids while doing it, that's even stronger." Sarah advised me to keep documenting everything: missed school pickups, nights the kids were left with babysitters while Anna disappeared, receipts, photos, anything that painted the real picture. So I did. I became meticulous, logging every detail, building a case brick by brick. Meanwhile, I tried once more to reach my parents. I called my mother and said, "Mom, I have proof Anna isn't who you think she is. I need you to listen." Her response was a dagger. "David, stop trying to drag her down. She's holding it together while you're chasing shadows. We don't want to hear it." I hung up, the familiar ache settling in my chest. But this time, it didn't break me. Because now I knew I had something stronger than their opinion. I had the truth, and soon the judge would see it too. For the first time in months, I felt like I was no longer drowning. I was swimming towards something solid. The courtroom was tense that morning, the air heavy with anticipation. Anna sat across from me, perfectly composed as always, her lawyer whispering confidently in her ear. My parents were there too, seated firmly behind her, as if their presence alone would tip the scales in her favor. When it was her lawyer's turn, he painted the usual picture: Anna as the steady, devoted mother, me as the unstable, distracted father. He called her to the stand, and she delivered her lines flawlessly: calm voice, measured tone, a performance honed to perfection. She looked at the judge and said, "I only want what's best for our children. I've been the one who's always there for them." But then it was our turn. My lawyer, Sarah, walked slowly to the center of the room, a calm determination in her eyes. "Your Honor," she began, "the respondent has portrayed herself as the sole pillar of stability in this family. However, evidence shows a very different reality." She handed the bailiff a folder. Inside were the photos I had taken, the ones of Anna in that dimly lit bar, hand in hand with another man. Gasps rippled through the room as the images appeared in front of the judge. Anna's composure cracked. She stammered, that was just a friend." Sarah pressed further. "A friend you meet late at night while leaving your children with babysitters? A friend you signed shared financial documents with?" She produced the receipts and records I had collected, more proof of Anna's double life. The judge's face hardened. "Mrs. Collins, you will explain this behavior." Anna's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him. My wife's face went pale as she fumbled for words. For the first time, she didn't look like the calm, collected woman she pretended to be. She looked cornered. Behind her, I saw my parents exchange nervous glances, their certainty shaken. For weeks, they had stood firmly in her corner, convinced she was the saint and I was the sinner. But now, in the bright light of the courtroom, the cracks in her mask were impossible to ignore. When the session ended, the judge's words echoed like thunder: "We will review this evidence carefully, but let it be clear, the credibility of the respondent is now in serious question." As I walked out, clutching the folder, I caught my mother's eyes. For the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't look at me with disappointment. She looked at me with doubt, and I knew the tide had finally begun to turn. 2 days after the courtroom twist, I got an unexpected call. It was my father. His voice, usually sharp and certain, sounded hesitant. "David, can we talk?" Part of me wanted to hang up, but another part, the son who still longed for his parents' approval, agreed. We met at their house that evening. Walking in, I noticed how quiet it felt. My mother sat on the couch, arms crossed, her eyes avoiding mine. My father gestured for me to sit. The silence was thick until he finally spoke. We saw the photos. We didn't know. I let out a bitter laugh. Didn't know. I've been telling you for months. You chose to believe Anna instead of your own son. My mother bristled. She seemed so put together, David. You were angry, emotional. You thought I was lying. I cut in. You thought the woman who left me, smeared me, and manipulated you was more trustworthy than your own blood. Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. My father leaned forward, his face lined with guilt. We wanted to believe the children were safer with her. We thought you were too consumed with work to see what they needed. But now it looks like we were wrong. I stared at them, my chest heavy. This was the closest thing to an apology I had heard, but it wasn't enough. Wrong? You didn't just make a mistake. You stood in court and testified against me. Do you realize what that did to me? To my case? To my kids? For the first time, my mother's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, we didn't want to lose Anna. She made us feel like part of her family in ways you never did after you grew up. Those words stung worse than any accusation. It wasn't just about Anna being convincing, it was about them choosing comfort over loyalty to me. That I stood, shaking my head. You might finally doubt her, but that doesn't erase what you did. I had to fight this battle alone, without my parents. And now, I don't know if I can ever see you the same way again. The room went silent as I walked out. For once, they didn't try to stop me, and in that silence, I realized something painful but true. Sometimes, even when the truth starts to come out, the damage is already done. The last day in court felt heavier than all the others combined. I sat with Sarah, my lawyer, my hands clasped so tightly they ached. Across the aisle, Anna looked like a shadow of herself, her hair pulled back hastily, her eyes ringed with sleepless nights. My parents were there too, but this time they sat farther back, unsure of where they belonged. The judge's voice carried through the silence. He reviewed the evidence in painstaking detail, the debts Anna had hidden, the late nights, the photographs of her with another man. Then he turned to the testimony that had shaken the case, the proof that I had consistently been present in my children's lives. Finally, he delivered his ruling. This court grants joint custody, with primary residence awarded to the father, David Collins. The mother will have visitation rights on alternating weekends and must complete financial counseling before seeking any change in custody arrangements. My chest tightened, my eyes burning as relief washed over me. I wasn't just keeping my kids, I was protecting them from the instability Anna had tried so hard to hide. Anna sat frozen, her lawyer whispering frantically, but she didn't respond. She looked at me just once, her eyes filled with venom, before gathering her things and storming out. As the gavel struck, I turned to see my parents. My mother's face was pale, her eyes watery. My father gave me the faintest nod, as if to say we were wrong. But I didn't linger on them. Not anymore. I walked out of that courthouse into the crisp air with my lawyer at my side, my children waiting for me at home, and for the first time since the divorce began, I felt like I had won more than just a legal battle. I had reclaimed my life, but one last chapter still remained, deciding how to live in a world where my parents no longer held the place they once did. Life after the ruling was quieter, though not easier. My kids filled the house with laughter again, their drawings taped to the fridge, their shoes kicked off by the door. Those small signs of normal life became my anchors. Every bedtime story, every school pickup reminded me why I had fought so hard, but the victory was bittersweet. My parents never apologized, not truly. They reached out a few times, my father with hesitant phone calls, my mother with short, stilted messages. Yet, every word carried the weight of what they had done, standing against me in the moment I needed them most. I realized that even if they wanted to mend things, some wounds never fully healed. That I learned to live without them. It wasn't easy, and some nights I still found myself wishing things had been different. But I came to understand that family isn't defined by blood alone. Family is the people who show up, who stand by you when the storm hits. For me, that was my kids, a cousin who refused to stay silent, and a few friends who never walked away. My name is David, I am 34 years old, and though my parents ignored my pain during the hardest time of my life, I came out stronger. I built a life without their approval, and in doing so, I found peace, and if you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. My advice to you is simple: never beg for love from people who choose not to give it. Build your life around those who truly care, even if that means starting from scratch. If my story resonated with you, please subscribe and leave a like, it means more than you know. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, sometimes the family you need is the one you create.